The winter of 2024 cost the average American family burning propane roughly $1,231 just to stay warm, and families on heating oil paid even more, $1,518 for the season, while natural gas households got off lightest at $634. Every dollar in that bill passed through a system installed by a contractor, serviced by a contractor, who earns on average $15,340 in lifetime revenue from each household he brings into the fold. This video is about a $50 far infrared radiant panel heater, a wall-mounted electric heater that plugs into any wall outlet and requires no contractor, no service agreement, and no maintenance of any kind. What makes this far infrared heating technology worth your attention is not that it is new or experimental. It has been running in German and Norwegian homes for decades, deployed in American factories since World War II, and quietly adopted by home office workers across the United States who watch their heating bills drop without anyone in the industry telling them to do it. The technology is not obscure, the physics is not complicated, and the results, when the conditions are right, are measurable within a single billing cycle. Here is the tension at the center of this story. A radiant panel that cuts heating costs by 30 to 40% compared to standard electric heating, installs without a professional, and carries an average lifespan of 30 years with zero moving parts. That product holds almost no shelf space in American hardware stores, receives almost no mention from HVAC professionals, and generates almost no coverage in mainstream home improvement media. The industry generating $150 billion in annual U.S. revenue, $310 billion globally, has no structural incentive to change that. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how these infrared panels work, why the math makes them a serious option for specific homes and specific rooms, and what a woman in a converted Pacific Northwest garage discovered when she replaced her ceramic fan heater and cut her monthly heating cost from $45 down to $26. You will also know the one condition that makes these panels fail, because that detail is what the ads leave out, and it matters more than anything else in the pitch. A standard electric convection heater draws 1,500 watts to heat a room. What it actually heats is the air, and warm air rises, pools at the ceiling, and sits 8 feet above your head while the thermostat on the wall clicks off, satisfied that the room has reached temperature. Your feet are cold. The floor is cold. The heat you just paid for is doing nothing useful at ceiling height, and the cycle starts again. A comparable infrared panel draws 600 watts for the same size room, and the mechanism is entirely different. Far infrared radiation travels in a straight line from the panel's surface until it contacts a solid object. Your walls, your floor, your furniture, your body, and those objects absorb the energy and re-emit it slowly as warmth. The room's own thermal mass becomes the storage medium, not the air above it. The result, measured in watts per square foot, is 7 watts of infrared capacity versus 10 watts for standard electric convection. A 40% reduction in energy draw for equivalent BTU output and thermal comfort that follows directly from not heating the ceiling. The U.S. Department of Energy has published this clearly. Lowering a central thermostat by 7 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 hours per day cuts annual heating costs by up to 10%. Infrared panels make that strategy livable because you drop the central system, heat the room you are actually occupying, stay warm, and let the rest of the house run cool. What that strategy is called in engineering terms is zonal heating, and it is not a trick or a loophole. It is the straightforward application of a principle any engineer would recognize immediately, which is that you should not pay to heat space you are not using. The history of this technology stretches back much further than the Amazon listings would suggest. In 1800, the German-British astronomer Sir William Herschel was running an experiment with a prism and a set of thermometers, trying to measure the heat carried by different colors of sunlight. When he placed a thermometer just beyond the red end of the visible spectrum, in a region where no visible light registered at all, the temperature climbed anyway, and what he had found was infrared radiation, a form of energy transfer that had been warming the Earth for billions of years before anyone put a name to it. Industrial application came roughly 130 years later, when automotive manufacturers in the 1930s began using infrared lamps to cure paint on car bodies, finding the process faster and less energy intensive than conventional convection ovens. By the early 1940s, during wartime production, factory floors across the United States and Europe were running infrared heating systems to dry materials, maintain temperatures on assembly lines, and heat metals. And the fuel savings over convection alternatives were documented at the time. American researchers Roberts and Gordon developed gas-burning infrared radiant tube heaters in the 1950s, and the technology spread through warehouses, aircraft hangars, and large commercial buildings. The 1970s energy crisis brought renewed investment when oil became expensive enough that engineers revisited every alternative on record, and far infrared panels for residential use received a new round of refinement during that period. In 2000, General Electric launched the first quartz waterproof infrared lamp alongside British manufacturer Tanson. And residential panel adoption was accelerating across Germany and Norway, while the North American market largely stayed still. Today's market includes ceramic infrared emitters, carbon fiber heating elements, and quartz infrared heaters, all variations on the same radiant heating principle Herschel discovered. By the 2020s, customer inquiries about infrared panels in the United States had grown 20 to 30%, driven almost entirely by remote workers heating converted spaces and home offices. People who found the technology not through contractors or hardware stores, but through forums, YouTube, and their own research. The panels were available, they just were not being recommended. That gap between a proven technology and its American market presence has a financial structure worth examining directly. What the HVAC industry actually sells is not comfort, it is a system. A central forced air furnace, a heat pump, a ductwork installation, an annual service contract, a filter replacement schedule, and a warranty structured to require certified technician service to remain valid. Each of those components represents a separate revenue event, and together they account for the $15,340 lifetime customer value that contractors carry on average from a single household relationship. The National Air Duct Cleaners Association, the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, and the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute are among the trade bodies that write and lobby for building codes, installer certification requirements, and equipment standards, and their member companies depend on the replacement cycle. Retrofit and replacement projects accounted for 62.5% of the U.S. HVAC equipment market in 2200, a share growing faster than new construction. A $50 infrared panel eliminates every part of that revenue chain in a room where it gets installed. No installer margin, no service contract, no annual filter, no certification required to mount it and plug it in. The entire $15,340 relationship gets bypassed in a single transaction. And that math, multiplied across 130 million U.S. housing units, becomes a conversation the industry would rather not have. Consider what the scale of that avoidance looks like in practice. Air conditioning systems alone consume 6% of all electricity produced in the United States, costing homeowners approximately $29 billion annually. And that figure represents only the cooling side of the same industry that installs, services, and replaces heating systems. The combined weight of $150 billion in U.S. revenue and $310 billion globally is not maintained by any single decision or policy. It is maintained by the accumulated inertia of a system where every professional trained to enter your home, assess your equipment, and recommend a course of action earns their living from a specific set of outcomes. And a $50 panel is not one of them. None of this requires coordination or active concealment, and that is the part worth understanding clearly. When a product removes your revenue stream entirely, you do not promote it, you do not train your technicians to recommend it, and you do not stock it in the supply houses your contractors use. You continue doing exactly what you have always done, and you wait for the customer to ask a question they have never been given a reason to ask. Most customers never ask. Now, a specific room because numbers on a screen land differently than a particular place on a particular morning. Picture a converted garage in the Pacific Northwest. Drywalled but not heavily insulated. A sealed concrete floor. A single-pane window on the north wall. The woman who works from this space every day had been running a 1,500-watt ceramic fan heater for 6 to 8 hours daily through the colder months, at a monthly cost of $45 in incremental heating. The heater ran loud. The air came out dry. Warmth collected near the ceiling while her feet, resting on the concrete, stayed cold by noon. After mounting a 1,300-watt infrared panel on the wall at standing height, she found she needed it running for only 3 to 4 hours rather than 6 to 8, because the panel was heating the desk, the chair, the floor surface directly in front of it, and her body, not the air above her head. Her monthly incremental heating cost dropped to $26. The headaches she had attributed to the dry forced air stopped. The panel runs silent, and on a $50 to $150 investment, the payback period measured in weeks, not years. That figure, $19 in monthly savings in an under-insulated converted garage, represents the floor of what this technology delivers under less than ideal conditions. In a well-insulated room with higher R-value walls and proper air sealing, the numbers improve. And here is the part where honesty earns more credibility than the ads ever could. Electricity in the United States costs an average of roughly 16 cents per kilowatt hour. Natural gas runs approximately 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour equivalent, meaning gas costs about 1/4 of what electricity costs per unit of energy. Infrared panels are 40% more efficient than standard electric convection heaters, and that efficiency is real and documented. But a 40% improvement over an input that costs 4 times more than gas does not close the gap on its own. Run the actual numbers on a living room. A 330 square foot space, roughly the average American living room, requires approximately 2,300 watts of infrared panel capacity according to the 7 watts per square foot industry standard. Running that load for 6 hours a day at the U.S. average electricity rate of 16 cents per kilowatt hour costs roughly $0.22 per hour, or about $1.32 per day. Over a 30-day month, that is $39.60 in electricity for that room. A convection system doing the same job would draw 3,300 watts, about $57 a month in the same room, under the same conditions. The monthly difference is $17.40, the annual difference is roughly $209, and the panel that generated those savings cost between $40 and $150 to purchase. That is a payback period of weeks, not years, on the electric baseline alone. Where infrared wins against gas is through zonal discipline rather than head-to-head fuel cost comparison. If a gas system heats an entire house to keep one room comfortable, a targeted infrared panel in that room, combined with a central thermostat dropped 7 degrees, starts to win on the total monthly bill, and the DOE's documented 10% savings from that thermostat reduction alone is part of the calculation. The combined effect is where real savings appear for gas-heated homes. Where infrared loses is in poorly insulated spaces running continuously. Infrared stores heat in the thermal mass of a room, the walls, the floor, the furniture, and a poorly insulated room loses that stored heat through its envelope faster than the panel can rebuild it. A renter in a basement unit with single-pane windows and minimal insulation bought a panel expecting to replace his electric baseboard system, found the cold drafts were constantly cooling the surfaces the panel tried to warm, ended up running it at full power continuously, and finished the month with a higher electricity bill than he started with. The panel is not a substitute for proper insulation with adequate R value or air sealing measures. Knowing that distinction before you spend $50 is worth more than any efficiency rating on the packaging. 3 questions determine whether this makes sense for a specific home and room. First, what is the current heating fuel? Homeowners on electric baseboard, ceramic heaters, or electric forced air will see a 30 to 40% reduction in consumption in well-used, well-insulated rooms. The math is direct, and the savings arrive within the first billing cycle. Gas-heated homes have a more nuanced calculation, where the opportunity is reducing the central system's load through zonal heating rather than replacing gas outright. Propane and heating oil users, paying $1,231 and $1,518 per season respectively, sit at the most favorable end of the comparison because their baseline cost is highest and the alternative looks best against a high number. Second, how well does the target room hold heat? Insulated walls, double-pane windows, and minimal drafts allow the infrared panel to build and maintain heat in the room's thermal mass. Single-pane windows and uninsulated walls disqualify the efficiency claims before the panel is even switched on. A simple test. Stand near the exterior wall of the target room on a cold evening and place your palm flat against it. If the wall surface feels markedly cold, heat is already escaping faster than any heater can economically replace it, and insulation is the first investment, not a panel. Third is the goal heating a defined space during defined hours or maintaining whole house warmth continuously. Infrared panels are zone tools, and they are designed to heat the room you occupy while you occupy it. Families needing consistent whole house temperatures, young children, medical requirements, genuinely severe climates still need a central system as the primary solution. Infrared is a supplement, and in many homes it is an effective and immediately payable one. The distinction matters because misapplying the tool, buying a panel for a situation that calls for whole house consistent warmth, is exactly the scenario that produces the disappointed Reddit posts that manufacturers quietly hope you will not read before purchasing. The growth pattern in U.S. infrared adoption makes this point concrete without requiring projection or extrapolation. Since 2002, the 20 to 30% increase in customer inquiries about infrared panels has come almost entirely from remote workers. People who converted garages, finished basements, or started working from spare bedrooms and discovered that running a central system to heat one occupied room was an expensive and inefficient way to stay warm. The information moved peer-to-peer, the product shipped direct, and the transaction completed before any member of the $150 billion industry had the opportunity to redirect the customer towards something more profitable. What is notable about this adoption curve is not its speed. It is actually slow by technology adoption standards, but its source. It is not being driven by advertising, by contractor recommendations, or by retail placement. It is being driven entirely by people talking to other people about their utility bills. That pattern has a historical precedent. When LED lighting began replacing incandescent bulbs in American homes in the early 2010s, the electrical supply industry, which had profited from frequent bulb replacement cycles for decades, did not promote the transition. Homeowners discovered LEDs through their own research, through energy audits, and through word of mouth, and adoption grew despite minimal retail enthusiasm. The parallel is not perfect, because LED lighting had a clear retail price advantage from day one, while infrared panels require more situational nuance to evaluate correctly. But the underlying dynamic, a more efficient technology gaining ground through peer adoption rather than industry promotion, is the same mechanism. The Columbus, Ohio family followed a version of this pattern. After installing wall-mounted infrared panels in their living room and master bedroom, they dropped their central thermostat from 70 degrees to 62, and over 6 winter months, their average monthly electric bill fell from $168 to $139, a 17% reduction, $29 per month, $174 across the heating season. Total panel investment, under $200 for both rooms. Payback period, under 14 months. And the panels they installed carry an expected lifespan of 30 years, with no moving parts, no filters, no refrigerant, no compressor, and no maintenance events between installation and the day they stop working. The HVAC system installed in the same house the same year will likely be replaced twice in that window. The European context matters here because it shows where the American market is probably heading, and the timeline is visible. Germany and Norway have significantly higher rates of residential infrared panel adoption than the United States, and the reason is not that European consumers are better informed. It is that the economics got there first. European electricity grids decarbonize faster, which changed the cost ratio between electric and fossil fuel heating and made the efficiency argument for electric infrared arrive at a more favorable number earlier. The United Kingdom sits at a point of active transition right now, with electricity running approximately 24.86 pence per kilowatt hour against 6.34 pence for gas as of 2024. A ratio that still favors gas per unit of energy, but in a country where building stock is old, poorly insulated, and expensive to retrofit with new central systems. UK government policy has been pushing electric heating adoption as part of net zero commitments, and infrared panels have entered the mainstream policy conversation in a way they have not yet reached in the United States. As the U.S. grid incorporates more renewable generation and electricity costs per kilowatt hour become more competitive relative to gas, the core economic barrier to electric infrared heating erodes, and the 40% efficiency advantage over convection electric, which is already real, becomes more financially meaningful with every incremental increase in electricity's competitiveness against gas. The technology is built, the physics is fixed. What shifts is the economic environment in which the math gets evaluated, and that environment has been moving in a consistent direction since 2020. Space heating and water heating account for more than 2/3 of home energy consumption in the United States, composing upwards of 42% of the average utility bill. The $310 billion global HVAC industry exists to service that consumption, and the incentive structure within it, the $15,340 lifetime customer value, the 62.5% revenue share from replacement projects, the certification requirements routing every transaction through a licensed professional, is calibrated to hold that consumption pattern in place and capture its economic value on the way through. A $50 panel does not collapse that structure. One heated room does not replace a furnace. But the behavior pattern, individuals doing their own research discovering a technology the industry had no reason to promote, buying direct, and watching their bills change, is the early-stage signal that large systems reliably fail to take seriously until the revenue numbers make it impossible to ignore. The HVAC industry is not running a suppression campaign. Active suppression would cost money and require coordination. Ignoring works better, costs nothing. A customer who has never been given a reason to ask a different question. Standing in front of a $3,000 estimate for a replacement system, signing the paperwork because no one in the room has ever told them there was another option. Return to where this started. The family paying $1,231 for propane this winter. The family paying $1,518 for heating oil. The family paying $634 for gas and watching the seasonal estimate climb again. Here is what any of them can do right now with no contractor, no permit, and no specialized knowledge required. Identify the room in the house where the occupants spend the most concentrated time. Assess the insulation. Insulated walls, double pane windows, minimal drafts. If the room holds heat reasonably well, Calculate the square footage and budget 7 watts of infrared panel capacity per square foot. A 330 square foot living room requires approximately 2,300 watts of total panel capacity, which can be distributed across 2 or 3 panels mounted on opposing walls, each costing between $40 and $150 depending on wattage. The panels do not require an electrician for a standard plug-in installation. Wall mount brackets are included. The power draw is within normal household circuit capacity, and the installation itself takes under an hour with a drill and a level. Drop the central thermostat by 7 degrees when the panels are running. Run them during the hours the room is occupied. Track the utility bill for 60 days. The Department of Energy's documented figure for that thermostat reduction alone is up to 10% in annual savings. The infrared efficiency gain over electric convection adds 30 to 40% on top of that in the heated room. In a well-insulated space with an electric heating baseline, the savings arrive within the first billing cycle, the same billing cycle as the $50 purchase. For a household currently paying $168 a month in winter electricity like the Columbus family, a 17% reduction means the panel investment pays back before the third bill arrives. Gas-heated homes see more modest results, and the discipline required to actually lower the central thermostat matters more than the panel itself. Propane and heating oil households find the comparison most favorable because the alternative they are measuring against carries the highest starting cost, and cutting $150 from a $1,231 seasonal propane bill is a different conversation than cutting $150 from a $634 gas bill. Poorly insulated rooms should get insulation first. The panel performs only as well as the envelope around it. The woman in the converted garage cut her monthly heating cost from $45 to $26. The family in Columbus cut their average monthly bill from $168 to $139. Neither number is a life-changing sum on its own, but both arrived from a purchase requiring no professional, no permit, and no maintenance for the next 30 years, and both came from a technology that has been sitting in plain sight, available online. Overlooked not because it does not work, but because no one in the system that services your home has any financial reason to tell you it exists. What the system protects is not a technology. What it protects is the service relationship, and the only thing standing between you and opting out of part of it is knowing the option is there. The next video on this channel examines heat pumps, which the Department of Energy describes as operating at 300 to 400% efficiency, or a coefficient of performance, COP, of 3 to 4, by extracting thermal energy directly from the outside air rather than generating heat from scratch. This is a technology that costs more than a wall panel, that the HVAC industry does sell, and where the version being sold to most American homeowners may not be the version that serves them best.